Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and yes, I certainly didn't expect myself to be coming back this time anytime soon because I thought, well, first of all, let me explain. You see, originally what I was going to do, following the news about Chris Chan's, Flutter's pregnancy. Flutter's pregnancy. It could be somebody else's pregnancy. I really don't know at this point. However, one thing I was always going to say is that maybe the best thing to do in situations like this, and probably the best thing I could possibly do, in a counter argument to the videos I put out, my guess was always this: if Chris really, we shouldn't immediately dismiss the idea of Chris being a bad parent, because I don't necessarily think that's correct. And I also don't think it's something that you can really judge it upon depending on the circumstances at hand. However, I thought to myself as well that knowing as much about Chris as I do, considering that Chris was the person who willfully neglected care of his dogs, Chris who couldn't, house train his dogs, who said he didn't love his dogs, and considering that, to be honest, Chris's lack of responsibility generally, I mean, it's probably down to the complete lack of responsibility is why Chris does spend so much time on the internet as he does. But then, of course, I was going to say, despite all of this, Chris, and someone might have taken the opportunity to say that this could be the start of a new beginning for Chris. Unfortunately, despite all of this, I'm still not holding my breath, and I'm about to explain why, and I'm pretty sure what Chris says in the next 30 minutes will cement why I'm not holding my breath either. That's kind of why I'm not going to say it. So, for those who don't know, Chris is no longer on Twitter. Chris is now on Blue Sky, which, if you don't know, is meant to be sort of a major counter argument to Twitter. But that's besides the point, because the reason why is because Chris blocked Donald Trump and Elon Musk, I believe. That's why Chris is on Blue Sky, I think. So, first problem we have to see is that Chris's title of this is still CPU Jesus Christ Chan Sonichu Prime. You would argue, and I would say from the very first moment, is that if Chris was that serious about, fatherhood, then this would have gone immediately. But because it isn't, yeah, I'll be honest. That's already a huge concern. But what can I do? I'm not social services. I can't say what Chris can and cannot do, or whom he can and cannot do. But this is that's one strike against. But this is sort of what Chris wrote after his Sonic Shadow Generations live stream, in which he kind of dropped the ball about someone being pregnant. So here we go. Going from last night's live stream and having seen some of the comments on the side while also being aware of the comments in past years, I feel like a bunch of you are either passive or plain hate watch me. It is apparent to me from the vibe I get from within the audience. You all have noticed that I don't respond to many comments from the sidebar, and the main comments I see are from those from Super Chat. To be blunt, and this is taking the past couple of decades into account as well, I feel dissatisfied with the level of toxicity and darkness within the fan base. Sure, come to a lot of you got into my... Well, it's good to know Chris's grammar has literally not improved squat in the past couple of decades or while Chris has been in the clink. Sure, some to a lot of you got into me due to my due to my antics being autistic and essentially an emotional or even comedic punching bag to you. Well, all you should know that I am a lot more complicated than that. And that I am the one who appreciates the finer things in life and the higher quality and tasteful insights, arts, media, and so on. A bunch of trolls in the past have taken advantage of me and even manipulated me into shit. Well, I should have known better in those times, and I should never have been such a victim of online bullying, but I was. And I know some of you hate me for one reason or another, but while I take my blame for having said too much in clearing away the Encyclopedia Dramatica page, or even the freaking quickie, that shit with Walsh and whatnot, a share of the Didn't Chris say that he would never mention Mary Lee Walsh ever again? Not a good start, Chris. A share of the blame does reside within specific individuals that are/were among all of you. I really wish none of you had even tried to manipulate it, that all of you could have been more authentically positive and honest with me. Oh, I think a lot of people were honest with you, Chris. You just didn't want to listen to it. Or even that there were absolutely no toxic or demonic influenced individuals amongst you. This is despite that Chris says that, but 5 years ago you spent months on end role-playing with Jacob Sockness. So who told... This entire thing can come across this is just Chris just regurgitating things that he said in 2019. And despite the fact that Chris claimed to have moved on, clearly that's a lie too, because you're still bringing it up. That Chris, you have not changed whatsoever. Because if you had, you would not even write any of this. You would have just said, just moved on from it. Well, mind you, with that being said, it's perhaps the reason why Chris can't move on is because whether or not Chris likes to admit it or not, people still talk about him day after day after day, no matter what. And I don't think Chris technically got what he wanted. He wanted people to notice him, I guess. I started being online for fun with the Pokey site and sharing things Sonichu and Rosie Rosechew, but it ended up being an emotional crutch because I didn't have many friends. And Mr. C, Barbara, and that particularly, I'm gonna just say he meant to say particularly sheltered lifestyle was practically suffocating. And what did the online life turn out into after finding NSFW art of me and the Sonichews and Rosechews? Misportrayals of me and the Quickville having anything to do with fucking Nazis, and finding the darker side of the internet with 4chan and shit. It became a lot less fun, and more of an emotional and mental strain on me. Yeah, Chris, everything, oh, woe is me. Well, what about, the boy, the attraction sign, you harassing Megan Schroeder, you doxing the Wallflower? Are you really trying to tell me that any of that was not your fault, Chris? Because I think it kind of was. So yeah, knowing that and the experiences hindered my appreciation of some fans who actually approached me in person with kindness, yet some of them showed their true colours by posting about the moment online and mocking me. What, you mean the moment when, it was leaked and people were furious and completely up the wall because of what you did to your own mother, Chris? Is that what you're talking about? Or what about the time when, you maced a game store employee back in 2014, nearly 10 years ago? Are you really trying to tell me that, you weren't going to be pointed out and mocked for ridicule because of what you did? Bear in mind, that whole incident was because Sonic's arms were a different colour. Are you really trying to tell me, Chris, people wouldn't have mocked you for something so facetious and completely just a non-factor? Is that what you're telling me, Chris? Is that... There is something wrong with society when people can't have common courtesy of others' respective lives. Well, that's fucking bullshit, Chris, because remember what you tried to do at too many games? And so you didn't have the common courtesy not to just, have a photo with somebody, but you had to peck people on the cheek, you had to hug them as though you were, trying to force them into your skin. What do you mean, Chris? Including those who are famous for the various reasons, including being in media, how do you think people like Britney Spears or even Justin Bieber feel letting themselves be superficially exploited and letting that become more popular as opposed to their better songs that actually showed compassion for themselves with soul deep honesty? Because Because, Chris, don't start comparing yourself with people who are actually talented. And by the way, Justin Bieber is a dad as well. He's been a dad for at least a year to this point. And if I'm also being completely fair and honest, yes, Justin Bieber's done some dumb things in his past, but you know what? He kind of moved on from it. He didn't bring it up. He continued doing music. He continued making music. So either people moved on from it, or they just stopped caring and people brought it up. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit more than that, but it's because, Chris, you didn't move on. I think that's the thing people are trying to say, is that you did not learn from your mistakes. You didn't learn from being easily manipulated by Liquid Chris or Alec Benson Leary or Jackie or the Idea Guys. You were just too stupid to see and too stupid to think for yourself and too stupid to, how many times, Chris, how many times have you been duped by people thinking you, by fake girlfriends? How many times did that happen to you? And how many times did you allow it to happen? And how many times did you just give stuff away to people because you were... I mean, I could bring up the whole shtick about Ivy and Chris thinking that Vanessa Hudgens, of all people, wanted Chris. But I'm assuming that doesn't matter to Chris, because all that matters is what happened to him as opposed to what he did to other people. Is that the logic we're going with? It's disheartening to say the least the love is there on surface level, but only some can grasp their emotional strifes. Oh, here we go. It's everything is our fault, apparently. And an even more select few really understand or know them at home, and only the famous individuals respectively know and understand as much as possible how they feel. Fuck off, Chris. You know that's not true. Can you call yourself someone who appreciates me or anyone specific when you have only learned of me what is only posted online, as opposed to being in person and actually showing authentic honesty and kindness with no further selfish intentions, including for entry into heaven realm? I'm actually going to... no, Chris, you're not right again, because you are... Chris... does anybody remember the comprehensive history by Geno Samuel, and how Geno Samuel actually does tell about some of the selfless things that Chris does, like give away his weed to the homeless and help, at a soup kitchen back in 2010, I believe it was, like late 2010. And bear in mind, Chris Chandler Comprehensive History is a very, very matter-of-fact documentary series. It's not designed to have any sort of agenda outside of documenting the wild things that happen in Chris's life. And guess what, Chris? You also had the opportunity to mention to Gino, if you wish, about things you did do, and if they were out there and documented, then just say that to Gino and stuff like that. And what about that time you also... Chris, remember there was also a point where Gino also put in that obitual you did for Paddy Chandler. I remember that. It damn nearly brought me to tears. And guess what? That was a moment where you were selfless, and that was a moment where it looked like you were genuinely distraught, and you tried to exclaim love for something you did hold very dearly in Paddy. So you don't need to be famous to do that, Chris. I've had pets who've died as well. And also, are you really... why? And Chris is just... This whole thing comes across as lecturing people as well. And Chris is no Jesus, because guess what? Jesus... Jesus taught... He lectured people, but he didn't condescend to people. That's one of the things people kind of almost forgot, is that Jesus did not condescend to people by saying, you can't see past all of this, because you know what, you're just too selfish to understand, and therefore God isn't even going to do that. Jesus does. That's not how that works. So I'm a little bit insulted the fact that Chris is using Jesus in that name anyway, because Chris doesn't act like Jesus. Chris doesn't really seem to care whether or not the implications of doing this are. It doesn't come across as blasphemous, but it just comes across as incredibly inauthentic. And like many other times in his life, Chris does not know what he's talking about or understands the implications of when you say stuff like this. Because Chris saying, let's just keep going. And it is really that hair not to fall for temptation to commit or speak evil or even fall into hatred. No comment. It takes one with strong sense of self and compassion, even a warrior strong soul with the greatest endurances, to commit to that and stay the course, but it's not that hard to go with. Common sense and help others out of a moment of authentic kindness. I am well aware that a lot of people, including at least some of you, are not in the best of living situations and have trouble affording kindness onto others amidst survival. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Affording kindness, no, Chris, that's not how that works. Sometimes people are perfectly capable of just being kind to each other. It's just sometimes they choose not to. It's not out of affording. Kindness is not a currency. Also, survival. What do you mean survival? Is this a silent way of Chris trying to say, by the way, I'm somebody who is on the teetering on survival. Please give me some money. I thought you've got a baby on the way, Chris. Why are you begging for money? Because if Chris doesn't do, you can tell what's gonna happen next. Chris is gonna start begging for money again. And Ukraine is the best example of kindness and compassion for others amidst very harsh survival situations, especially right now. Again, I applaud Vladimir Zelensky for his level of compassion for the people of his country and accepting of help from others to improve as much as possible. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Chris doing what Chris has always been very good at, trying to lecture people on things that Chris knows fuck all about. What does Chris know about the Ukrainian invasion? What does Chris really know about Vladimir Zelensky? What the fuck are you talking about, Chris? Chris, let me break it down to you like this. A foreign power was invading his country. What did you expect Zelensky to do? Roll over and play dead? Ukraine is the second biggest nation in Europe. You really think Zelensky was just gonna, again, roll over and play dead? Also, compassion. I don't know what's so compassionate about conscripting people saying you might die, but you've got to defend our home. You may that's more heroism than compassion. But whether you want to throw all of those things, I'm not even gonna get into this. I'm not gonna start lecturing Chris about real world political situations because, well, Chris was in the clink, but I would have imagined that Chris would have had access to news. I guess. Up to all of you can take a page from Vladimir's book, a comedian turned politician forced to endure and survive and care for his people and himself. That's not just warrior soul, that was his life's calling bringing him forward to be. Not quite. It's not quite like that. All of you should, on your respective abilities and situations, soul search and find what makes you feel content and happy and what your purpose is. Although still get school educations and pay attention to at least pass the classes, so you can have that knowledge in all parts of your minds. From consciousness to unconsciousness, knowing is half the battle, and knowledge is power, also experience. Bullshit, Chris, because what about your experience, Chris? Have you ever learned from your experience? I don't think so. Compassion and empathy and great and humbling powers to have. But I digress. The point I am trying to make is that while there are reasons to hate me amongst some of you, and I can't make all of you who do change your feelings so quickly, I deeply wish for your undividing earth and world to have more authentically positive and honest people within them. Borrowing from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for a moment, I have a dream where the good magic... Fuck me, Chris. No, Chris, are you really doing this again? You know what? I gave Chris quite a lot of shit for getting this wrong previously, like 6 years ago. But guess what? Chris is doing it again, except where the good magic and original characters. Fuck me. I was going to say boring, but it looks like Chris stole more than it. I'm just going to call this stealing from Martin Luther King. Original characters and locations that were divided from us long ago and returned to us without any intangible veils between us and them. And in that we are all the people can find goodness in ourselves that can be spread to heal and redeem the bad and toxic individuals that survive somehow, and the worst toxic individuals in politics and formally included in offices worldwide. I have a dream where on the internet and in person we do not hate speak for the sake of hatred or even shallow and selfish reasons and intentions, but rather represent an authentic kindness from within ourselves, respectively in self-love towards everyone else locally and worldwide. I have a dream where all parents are not lazy and phoning it in with their children and their children's children. I think this is, in the trade, this is what they call foreshadowing. As well as their closest good, better and best friends and allies. Television, touchscreen and gaming devices. What about books, Chris? Can we not throw books in there as well? And of course, artificial intelligence are not babysitters, nor is AI that creative or soul-loving within even the depths of its programming that the numerous all-one programmers have painstakingly put their energy and souls into. Soul energy is not as effectively put in through a keyboard, but through the love of pen or pencil and colour with marker onto paper. Ironic, since Chris, just tapper for this. I have a dream of the next generation and all future generations after Alpha are intelligent and put the Alphas in their place to mentally and emotionally improve and do better like those whose... Are you getting bored, guys? I've been here for nearly half an hour. I am bored out of my mind reading this. Whose physical age goes as far back as the late 70s. How very specific. Such as the man behind MLP Silver... Though, dude, keep the ego humble down. I have a dream where media companies no longer produce media and merchandise that are cheap and deeply dissatisfactory and continue or resume with that which is and has proven to be great in quality. MLP Friendship is Magic Seasons 10 to 14 #Hasbro. I have a dream that the companies are open for input and OCs from everyone within the fan base in addition to their staff, and even in actual mutual collaboration with at least one or a few of the original creators from within the fan base. Pokemon Lightning Bolt, Pokemon Diva Pink, and I'm guessing he meant and Pokemon Battery Charge Blue with Sonichus and Rosechus, as well as the official Sonichu and Rosechu video games, Nintendo, Sega, with me, Jesus Christ Chan Sonichu Prime, at the creative helm and doing my part in the final products. And I have a dream where upon when or after this earth becomes undivided and merged back together, he's still fucking talking about the dimensional merge. Fuck me, this child is doomed. The healing energies and light powers of the cosmos, universe core and matrix, and even heaven realm dispels all shreds of toxic darkness within the peoples and promotes positive and healing energies for the better future and tomorrow. And even though darkness and evils would return, that we would all be stronger and better able to dispel them for our and everyone's safety mutually. Magic must be in order to do even that. Thank you, lightning, heart, lightning, rainbows. And the very first comment is this: "You had sex with your mother." Yes, thank you so much, Trenchfoot. I mean, sorry, like, what did I say at the beginning of this video? That here I was like gonna say, you know what? I wasn't going to, defend Chris for 1 second for thinking he could turn it around and actually be a father and all that, because what you've done is you've brought other people's points to light, and Chris has only exasperated them only 1,000 times awful. What is all this waffle about magic and you thinking that people don't see your positive? What's that got to do with anything? Because you're only having it going at people because people only see you for what you've done, and unfortunately, a lot of things of what you've done, Chris, have not painted you in a good light. If you have done good things, people would have painted you. People would have said what a good guy you were. If you'd done good things, if you did them without, being selfless, if you did them without thinking that you did them without an ulterior motive, you would have people would have said, wow, you know what? Maybe we give Chris a hard time. Maybe Chris was just born in the wrong century. Maybe Chris just didn't have the capacity despite himself. He still did it. They don't see you like that, Chris. They may think they see you like that, but unfortunately that sympathy dies on its feet immediately the second you did She Came for Quick.jpg. You did it way before that, but I'd say that's the point where people stop feeling bad for you. Even, and I'll live with you this guy, even the fucked up stuff with Blue Spike, even then I still didn't feel bad for Chris. I'm sorry, Chris. It's a bit late for that now, Chris, and I could, without even looking through any more of the comments, I could immediately say, one of them is going to say, get a job, Chris. I can tell you immediately. But, let's go through the rest of the comments. I'm curious. You fucked your mother, you will forever and always just be a fucked up, mentally twisted, irredeemable monster. Then, of course, Charlie Penn drops this. Hey Christine, I learned a lot of your story this past summer, and as I learned more about you, I feel like I could personally connect with your situation. I doubt that, Charlie. You did not fuck your mother. Don't start pretending you've got anything in common with Chris. I have experienced some similar adversity firsthand in which my fits of emotion were taken advantage of by others for entertainment. This heavily impacted the way I perceive myself today, even after growing and maturing as a person. Well, okay, fair enough. The difference, however, Charlie, is that you learned from your mistakes. You learned fine well that you've got to stop being so, emotionally involved in what you do. I learned that as well, but I learned that before I finished high school. I learned that to stop caring that much by the time I was 20. Those days were long behind me, and that was long before that was before I even started my first video on the internet anyway. So I get what you mean, Charlie, but don't start trying to feed it into Chris's ego, because here's how Chris interprets this level of generosity from people like Charlie. Chris will nitpick certain things and then will take that as gospel, and without taking into account anything else. That's how Chris does this. That being said, I understand how much one can be affected by this kind of thing. You have clearly come very far as a person. As demonstrated by the ability to reflect on the past and see all perspectives of it. I am very curious as to what you think about these days, since I believe that we are very similar. Explaining this in depth would be difficult, as there would be so many things I could discuss. Regardless, happy Thanksgiving and best wishes. I hope that you have a joyful holiday season. People are so cruel. They are certainly not raised right. You are a woman, a powerful one at that. Keep your head up high. All of the MLP fans stand with you, Christine. I can only assume that that's either a troll or somebody who's straight up... Never mind. So you can confirm is you're having a baby. If you're comfortable, could you clear up the confusion about the birth of your child? Many people think you said somewhere around that point and you're expecting, or at least you're trying to conceive with a very lucky lady. You don't have to answer if you're not comfortable. Have you talked with it? Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's you, just do you. That's all anyone can ask. Well, I suppose anybody could have just said Chris could have fucked himself and therefore wouldn't have had to go to prison for 2 years. And also, Chris, maybe I just look like another bad person with horrible intentions, but no, I appreciate you no matter who. Do you think Chris deleted some comments? Because I'm not entirely sure at this point whether or not Chris just thought the best thing to do was just to sort of take things on board. And by the way, this isn't even... So we go from whatever the hell this was about to what was going on here. And this is sort of when shit hit the fan in regards to the pregnancy situation. The pregnancy saga, I should say. Okay, all of this is starting to get out of control now. There is no pregnancy. I was speaking hypothetically in that live stream. I am so surprised how even when I say something hypothetically, it gets misunderstood. Thank you for your kindness. I reiterate, there is no pregnancy with anyone. Well, I suppose at this point... Well, here's the thing I gotta say about that. Fine, Chris. We'll take your word for it. Maybe you meant it hypothetically. Maybe there was something people were missing. Maybe there was something I was missing. But how many times, Chris, have you been one to lie? How many times, Chris, have you been one to say something and then you immediately do the opposite? How many times, Chris, have we understood? You see, Chris, I need to understand this. And if there is no child, Chris, if your girlfriend or whoever else is not pregnant, fair enough. We'll not mention it. All I'm saying, Chris, is, well, for the love of God, you better be telling the truth about there not being a kid, because what happens when summer comes round and Lil C is brought into this world? If you are lying, Chris, and you were speaking hypothetically, then what was it really about then? Was it about a character you were writing for Solitude? Is that what you meant by that? But whatever. That's okay, but for the time being, let's just take this as meaning that there is no baby. Let's just say Chris is telling the truth. Okay, so let's say there is no child. Okay, fine. Whatever. We'll see. We'll hold Chris to account on this. But we'll wait and see what happens in like 6 months' time. I'm not saying I want to be proven wrong about this. All I'm saying is, Chris, well, I also think Chris knows fine well he will not be able to look after a child. I'm not saying Chris could... Well, no, Chris couldn't. But even if you wanted to prove me wrong, Chris, then why did you say that there was no pregnancy? Whatever. Let's see how this plays out, because it's not that I don't want to think Chris can't do it, but well, what else can I say? I'm not holding my breath. But with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys enjoyed like the return of the monthly updates, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. So take care, and bye-bye for now.